Welcome back to Whole. My name is David Stone, and this is Robert Grant, and we are continuing. This episode is actually episode 5, and it's called The Neurodivergent Congregation: What Churches Get Wrong. And it's
Mm,
basically kind of a continuing discussion of as Robert said in the last episode, not why should churches care, but we want churches to care. And that's our heart. I think we have to
yeah.
talk about this podcast. Um, I have a tendency to be, um, I often say this silly line. I can talk bad about pastors because I are one.
Okay.
Um, I can talk about churches because I've put my whole life, on
Mhm.
the line for them, and I love her. I love the church, and I love her people. But man, we're a jacked up mess sometimes. And so let's talk about that. So I want you to kind of ask me, or Um, let's continue this conversation about neurodiversity in the church.
Yeah. Good. And gosh, I'm just, kind of back in that spot where I was, I think it was our episode 4, where it was what's neurodivergence and
Mm,
what care. Just thinking about how big and how kind of big this topic is, and
it
how many
is.
people it's involving and how many experiences it is involving that people have had and are having out there and the complexity of it, which I think is why it's so great that we're talking about it. And hopefully other people are talking about it too. Um, what do churches get wrong? Or, we could say that a lot of ways, right? What's not helpful? What's not
Hmm.
meeting the need of neurodivergent individuals, which I think all of that, should be important
Hmm.
in church. So, let me ask you this, I guess, first of all, because you've been in and out, churches and
Of
like you
employment.
said, you said you can talk about it because it's like, it's your family. It's like
Yeah,
you're
right. Yeah.
immersed in church. So what 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 are churches talking about? What are the conversations behind
Mm,
the door with church leadership about neurodivergence? Have you even been in any? Have you heard any? And were any of them
mm.
helpful conversations, or were they like, how we need to get rid of that person because they're disrupting the service? I mean, what have you heard, on that side of things?
So do you want me to put on a mask and tell you
No,
what
we,
tell tell
we're
you
not
what
doing.
tell you
You
what
can.
we want to hear, or what is actually happening? Well, first of all, when you
What's
first asked that question, halfway through the question, I thought, we're not thinking about it first. Um, and then second of all, yes, we are. The second thing that came into my head was, man, that dude's a lot, or she's a
Mhm.
lot.
Yes,
Meaning
yes.
what?
But
She's not like us, and we really don't enjoy hanging out with her, and we're glad that Jesus loves her because we don't have to.
oh gosh.
I mean,
Okay.
we don't say that
I
out
mean,
loud, but
but it's
like
the
you said
message.
earlier, the message is sent,
Yeah.
pretty clearly. I will say some of my most proud moments of people that are very close to me, some of their proudest moments, happened in the church's, um, most shameful moments. Um, Protecting the innocent, the details. However, there's a population of folks at a at a church that I know of, a local church, and some of the people that I dearly, dearly love. Um, well, I'll just say it. Um, there's a group of intellectual disability. That's part of my past. That's part of my history. People that I grew up with the Ark of the Ozarks summer camp. And I was a
Yeah.
lifeguard
Okay.
at 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 the Ark of the Ozarks. I worked for the Ark of the Ozarks growing up. And that population of folks, there were certain churches in our area that had special needs at that time, and I think sometimes they'll still call it that, or we're the friends class, or these are our special friends, that kind of thing. And when I was growing up, when we met, if you remember, that population sat over to one side towards the front, and
Yeah.
they loved our old pastor. They loved him. Like, and part of that is just he's a presence, he was a big, whatever.
Yeah.
Fast forward 30 years probably, and I wasn't here. I just hear the story that they were rowdy or whatever. They were becoming and what do we say? They're a distraction.
I knew you were going to say the D word. I've heard it many times.
They're a
Yeah.
distraction to what the Lord is really trying to do in this place.
Yeah.
And so what happens to them? Rosa, we want you to go to the back of the sanctuary. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And when I was first starting in student ministry, college ministry, that was had this wonderful youth and college professor at Southwestern. Phil Briggs was his name, and he used to say, this isn't about, um, a lot of times people want to do youth ministry or children's ministry, even college ministry. I see that now. I'm working with primarily with working with older high school and college students. We like the idea of having those folks in our midst, but we sure would rather not have to deal with the mess. So translate, so VBS. We need to do VBS, but don't ask me to help. Give them some Kool-Aid and some cookies and have them, preferably if they have their own wing or their own building, so that we don't even have to deal with them. Same thing with youth ministry. Man, don't
Yeah.
bring those kids in here, the skateboarders. God forbid we actually have a conversation with this kid and ask them why they're struggling.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's burned in my memory. It's burned, a hole in my heart, really, to see these are my people and how we treat our people, God's
Yeah.
people. Like that statement in last time when you said, they literally said, you're welcome to come, but your child's not.
Yeah.
How is that okay? Right. And so for me as a leader, um, what are we doing? What are we doing to really even think about? And that's why we're doing this podcast. We want to start the conversation because
Yeah.
I just don't, I will confess, I don't think that the conversation is happening much. It might
Right.
be happening some, and that would be awesome. I want to learn from them. I want to see what they're doing and say,
Yep.
wow, how can I be a part of that?
Right.
I want to see us have a movement of ministry spaces and churches and communities where we fully embrace all of God's people. If
You
we
know, it's
believe that every human being, we talk a lot about life, don't we? I'm
yeah.
sorry, I'm on a soapbox. You've ramped
No,
me
go
up.
ahead. Go ahead.
If we say that every person, every human being on this planet, in past and in future, matters to God, Genesis, the Imago Dei, that we are made in the image of God. Jesus said that you're to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
So there's two things. I was in a coaching environment yesterday, in a group coaching environment, and we talked about that. There's two sides of loving, right? Love God, yes, and love people. But he didn't say just be love your neighbor as yourself. So there's some self-love too that we need to say. I need to, in my shame, in my guilt and shame, realize I'm made in the image of God, and God doesn't make junk. God doesn't make, mistakes. So therefore, I must be, like, um, what was the painter? Bob Ross. I must be a happy accident or something, you know, because so are we going to treat people like they're made in the image of God or a mistake? I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
went there. You
No,
opened the door and I went there.
I don't think you meant anywhere that doesn't need to be gone to. Um, obviously, if we're trying to answer this question, what churches are getting wrong or not being helpful with, or whatever we want to say it, one obvious one is they're not talking about this. They're not thinking about it. They're not planning for it. And if it does come up, it's usually on the side of what you started off with. Oh, wow, that person is a lot. And maybe we need to make sure they sit in the far back corner if they're
Right.
going to be here, or,
Yep.
it makes me think, first of all, I know, and that there are spaces out there where people are really trying and probably doing a good job.
Yes.
So we're not talking about
No.
every church everywhere. And
No.
actually, there are places in my hometown here, there's a lot of churches. And I have actually really looked into this a lot because a lot of my clients have been interested in it. And I would like to say, here's a place you can go
A
where
safe
I know.
place, right?
So I do have a list. I've researched a lot and I have a list. It's an extremely short list compared to all the churches that are in my local town. But I do
Mm,
have a list of places that would be safe for them to go to. It's just sad that it is so short. Uh, but I
yeah.
think I want to share stories I've heard on the front lines real
Yeah,
quick.
please do. Yeah.
Um, Cared about this was a mom and an autistic son, who she was met with and told, "You're perfectly fine to come back, but he's not welcome at the church anymore." He was 9, I think, at the time that that happened. There was a mom and a daughter that I worked with, and the daughter was autistic and gifted, and I remember some very distressful sessions because they had just had a meeting with the church leaders and they were suspending the daughter, who was 8, for 4 months. Everybody else in the family could come, but the daughter was suspended for 4 months from church so she could figure out how to behave more properly in church, was the message to that family. Uh, I'd like to say that I can only think of these 2 examples, but that's not true. I have I have even actually thought about writing a book and
Yeah.
including all the stories because I have tons of them,
Golly, man.
that come in. And it's really sad, of course. At first, it starts to sound outrageous,
Yeah,
outland.
yeah.
And then when you're on story number 123, it doesn't feel outlandish anymore. It
It
just feels
it
sad
feels
and point
outrageous is what it feels.
outrageous as well. But it's
Rage
happening.
filling, rage, table table flipping rage, righteous indignance.
For sure. I mean, I think, for me and probably many of these folks I've talked to, which is such a sad thing I'm about to say, you're so used to it that it's not even outrageous anymore. And I think that's kind of the point it gets to. And then you just give up.
Yeah,
A lot of these folks I've worked with, it's just like they're not going to try another church. Like
no,
they've kind of given up
yep, yep,
after too many of these experiences, and
mm,
that's what's happening, and that's something that the church is getting wrong. And they're not understanding how to have conversations about what we're talking about and how to really help support people and what they need to do differently. So people aren't getting sent a rejection shaming message from the church of all places. And
exactly,
then also feeling like there's no place for them in a church
right,
and getting a message sent to them. That's pretty wrong if we want to call something wrong.
right,
Um,
right.
yeah.
Oh my goodness. So, this came back this when you were talking about, in last episode, you were talking about, um, you bring your faith with you,
Mhm.
that your faith wasn't in a person, a man. So we're not even gonna talk about pastor worship, okay? Or, the charismatic leader that is just
Yeah.
rampant in American religion right now. Or it's been there forever, right? I get it. I follow Paul, I follow Apollos, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's been around a long time. So, but we are perfecting it every day. So, all right. So, something struck me in my head. Growing up in a Baptist environment, what we would call, and it sounds bad, but instead of a high church environment, it's a low church. That's, a lot of the Western expansion and revivalism, kind of fuels some of these denominations and how we do things. Um, but I came, and kind of where I'm headed with this. Probably, it was back in 2017 or so. I got reacquainted with a friend and had done some graduate work, and part of his graduate work was in an Anglican church plant as a
Okay.
Baptist
Mhm.
at a Baptist seminary. And this professor knew that this would be the best thing for my friend, to go and serve in this Anglican context. And the first thing that the Anglican pastor said to him, I don't know what they call him, probably not pastor, but whatever, in that context, he said, I need you to go to morning prayer 3 times a week or whatever. You know, he's like, what's that? And he hands him the Book of Common Prayer and he says, go do it. And we have these groups and they meet at such and such time. And and he goes, so he goes the first time. He's like, I have no idea what's going on here. This is crazy, all this kind of stuff. He goes back to the father and he goes, hey, father, so and so, hey, is there like a manual for this? Is there? He goes, no, that's the manual. And he's like, that. So I had no idea about all this kind of stuff, right? But common prayer, right? So Thomas Cranmer writes this book, the Book of Common Prayer, basically so that in every context, in every home, the Bible could be studied and we can pray together. And there are schedules and reading schedules and lectionaries and things like that so that everyone is on the same page. My question to you is, does that make any sense to help this extremely large population to at least find some anchor to Christ in the midst of trying to find these church, find a home for a community? Do they almost have to build their own?
Well, before I respond to that, I just want to say that I love that I know 50% about what you're talking about there. I'm like, well, I love when David goes into theological David mode. I'm like, I don't know what that book is. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, well,
But
that's again the assumptions, right? That we assume.
right, I'm like, I have no idea what the Book of Common Prayer is. But
Well, because
I
you
was
because
thinking, I
we
was
were
thinking
raised in a
this.
tradition. Yeah, we were raised
Yeah.
in a tradition that sound, and that was my joke with my friend. Well, that sounds Catholic. And he goes, "Yeah, in the holy
Oh,
one holy Catholic Church kind of sense, in the
oh my
universal
gosh.
church kind of thing." And I'm like,
Listen, no, I'm not I mean, nobody's going to mistake me for like knowing all the theological ins and outs and facts, and especially things religious denominations have created. I couldn't keep up with tried, but I think you bring up a good point. Like maybe, I mean, but for, I would like to believe that that isn't the way it has to happen.
"Yes,
I would like to believe that people could just learn and grow and shift and understand how to better be in relationship in, with any neurodivergent person who was walking into their church. I mean, that would be, I think, the
that's the
ultimate
ideal." Yeah,
right. But I certainly would want any neurodivergent person to connect with, spiritually and with their faith, even if, they didn't feel like they could go to a church.
right,
Like,
right.
that's not a qualifier for that,
Yeah,
and that's the way it had to be for them, and the way it worked for them, then that's great. But I would ideally like to see the church just do a better job
man, that's a great
of,
answer. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a great answer. That makes total sense. Um, so in that light, um, if you could talk to people like me, faith leaders, um, what would you say?
Oh gosh, this is kinda similar to the question you asked me in the previous episode, I think, right at the end. You're supposed to be landing
Exactly. So now,
took the
and I
point.
said that we would get to this in this
Yeah,
episode. So, like,
yes,
what, what, what are the handles that we need to put on this box so that we can at least try to move the discussion forward,
or
and like, so
I
we
would say
not again, answer this question of not why churches should care. They should already stinking care
yeah,
because they should believe theologically that everyone is made in the image of God. So
yeah,
that
how
should
we
be a
want them.
given in the postulate, right? In the theorem, that should be the given. But let's not talk about that. Um, what was the way you phrased it? Um,
How we want
we
them to
want
care.
them to
Yeah,
care. So
yeah.
tell me tell me what that looks like to Pastor
Well,
David.
Pastor David, I think the things that pop into my mind first or that, you actually bring your neurodivergent folks, uh, who are in your church or, who are calling you up, asking you about your church or visiting for the first time or whatever, you bring them in
Yeah.
on purpose and you actually ask them
Uh,
and you listen to what they say.
wow.
And and you keep that as an ongoing practice,
Wow.
right? I think that pops into my head first and foremost. I would say secondly, just being in a lot of churches and seeing how things go. I think a big thing is being willing to let go of some of the performative things that happen in a church.
Yeah.
It has to look this way. That has to be perfect. So and so has to walk down the aisle perfectly and pick up the communion tray in this way. Like, I think letting go of some of those performative pieces and recognizing that that's not the most important thing here. The most
Mm.
important is how you are building relationship and
Yeah.
connecting with people, even if it doesn't always look perfect,
Yeah.
in terms of how the whole show went down that week, right?
Yep. Oh,
Because
wow. Yeah.
that may be part of what you're running into. You use the D word, distraction. I can't tell you how many times that is what I have heard is there being a distraction in the service. There being a distraction to the Sunday school teacher in the Sunday school classroom. And it's like, well, they're really being themselves. Let's first of all start there.
Wow.
They're not being a distraction. They're being themselves. And then other people are taking it as a distraction. So let's label it the correct way to begin with.
Mm.
And, I understand that there's complexities to situations. And so there are times where maybe it is about coming in and supporting, a parent with a child who keeps trying to run out of the church into the street and everybody's getting involved in that and you can't get through the service. Then maybe there is spaces there where you're coming in and trying to help support that parent and figure out what else you could do to help with that child, but making sure that's the way you're coming at it
Mhm.
instead of what are we going to do about her? And well, she just can't be in here anymore. Or we're just going to have a meeting with mom and tell her she just can't be in here anymore. Like, that's not the way to come at it. Right. And then there are other things that aren't really distractions at all. You're just calling them distractions.
Mm.
Uh, Only you probably need to go work on yourself and your low tolerance for distractions, not be like trying to change the other person. I mean, so bringing in the people and hearing what they have to say and really listening and trying to then create a space that really works.
Mm.
Um, and bring your whole congregation in on that.
Mm.
There have been some really good experiences I've been involved with. I remember one where it was like a teen girl who was autistic was in this church I was in. And like clockwork, because she was probably on her own internal clock, she would stand up in the middle of meeting or talking, and she would slowly move her way out of the pew and walk down the aisle. And sometimes she would hum to herself. And it was something where, like, probably a lot of people could notice she was doing this wherever she was sitting. And I remember the pastors reaching out to me
Mm.
or were like,
Mm.
some people are saying she's distracting them from the service. What should we do about this? And the first thing I said to them was, well, first of all, you make sure that you don't shame her and lower her self-worth by your approach. And secondly, like, is it distracting you
Right.
while you're up there? And they said no. And I said, then leave her alone.
Mm.
Like, if somebody comes to you and says they're being distracted, maybe you try to help them come up with some strategies so they're not so easily distracted
Mhm.
by other people instead of making this about her and she's the problem. And
Wow.
then I did give them an idea for putting a sensory space in the back of the church,
Mm.
and they had certain sensory items and regulation items that people could go to.
Yep.
And they actually do that. And actually, I think they even made an announcement once about, I know that when people came to them and said things, they said, like, hey, we're not going to tell her she can't do that. You know, she's being herself and we want to look. I mean, they did a very good job
Yeah.
moving forward.
Right.
And it can and does go that way sometimes,
Yeah.
but just nearly nowhere near enough does it go
Yeah.
that way sometimes.
So 2 things. What a story and then a question. Um, you said about the distraction of or not well, the D word, yes, but, um, the the programmatic side,
Yeah.
as a musician's husband, we the show must go on, first of all, and then everything has to be, that's just part of being a professional musician, you, it's all about presenting the best, approach or whatever. I remember in seminary, this is the coolest thing. My uncle was my cousin. Um, we went to seminary together, lived in the same apartment complex, and so my uncle and aunt and uncle were down visiting them, and it was Christmas time, and so in our little church, our pastor did an Advent wreath, and it was part of the children's message, the children's sermon, and each week he would have one of the children strike the match and light an Advent candle.
Okay.
And it was live. There was live, evergreen, and it was close to Christmas, so this evergreen it's pretty dry, right? You can see where we're headed. So we strike the match, he hands it to Billy. Billy drops the match into the boughs of holly, and it's smoke and, the whole deal.
Right.
And here's where my tender-hearted uncle is bawling, because what I probably would have done is what I learned from my dad. Here, give me that. Let me do that.
Mm. Right.
But my pastor, Rodney, said, oh, man, that's okay. Handed it back to the kid to try again. Lit the
Wow.
candle. And my Uncle Ed is like, he said, I couldn't. He goes, we should have just gone home. That's the sermon right there. The children's sermon was the sermon, And
Right.
you you look at Jesus. Jesus said, let the little ones come to me. People don't realize the theological implications. Children were not, they were looked at as a problem because they carried disease. They often died young. They were a problem, all this kind of stuff. And so when he's got these children who are just climbing all over him, the disciples are like, hey, man, can we get the kids away here?
Yeah.
We don't want to, we don't want to kill Jesus with all the, their germs and whatnot. No, no, no. Let the little children come to me. That's a huge thing. So my question to you is, and you said this about interviewing, talking to the neurodivergent folks,
Yeah.
interviewing them.
Yeah.
Give us some questions to ask so that I can be an informed pastor to
Sure.
ask them. What are some things?
I think, things that pop into my mind are questions like, when you come here, you know, what kinds of things in terms of just the environment, but all the physical environment, but the way people interact would make you feel the most comfortable
Mhm.
or would make you feel the most safe or
Yeah.
then would make you feel like you didn't have to mask because they probably know what that term is, the neurodivergent people. Um,
That's
I
good.
would also say, like, help me understand you.
Yeah.
Like, what about going through what we do on Sunday morning or Sunday night or whatever, you know, feels, okay for you and what part of
Mhm.
it is are you kind of struggling to be a part of and set through there. Help me understand. And then just outright asking as you're here and you're navigating, what suggestions do you have? Not just for yourself, but that you think would help this experience go better for neurodivergent people who come into our church.
Mm,
And how can we make sure that's known? Like, what would you have liked to have seen and heard and experienced right at the beginning?
mm,
Yeah, I I think that I think it all starts with a willingness. I don't really think the
hmm,
application is that complicated. Well, but I think you got to shift from a certain way to this way. And I want to end with this story because as you were talking, I thought this story needs to be shared in this podcast. I was working with a client who was a part of a church, and this client happened to be a very good singer. She was
mm,
also a teen who was autistic, an older teen who was autistic, but great voice. And so she was a part of the choir. She got into the choir, and I'm sure they loved her voice
yeah.
in the choir. But she also stemmed, and when she would stem, she would move her body kinda like this, and she would stem a lot when she was singing in the
Mm,
choir, and so they put her on the very end
mm,
of the choir because this particular church and choir, they videoed their choir singing, and then it went somewhere. I don't know how it all worked. Um And so they put her on the end so she could be edited out of the video. And she was edited out of every video. Everybody else in the choir was in it. And she knew this. If this church had any clue the number of sessions we talked about the shame and the I don't belong and I'm not right that they created
right. Mm,
that decision, I wonder if they would feel like they were acting so Christian. Like, this is real stuff. These are real people on the other side of these decisions.
yeah. Yeah.
And just stop and think about that for a second. I just felt like that was really important to share here because
Yeah.
I want churches to do well
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I sure as heck don't like it when there's somebody sitting across from me who's already trying to navigate life and get through it in so many systems, who's now dealing with shame and rejection and this big hit to their self-worth because these people that they think know everything and they respect are editing her out of a video because she's not good enough to be in it. Like, I don't like it.
No.
And it's
And
not right.
I don't think the Lord likes it either.
Okay. I don't either. Yeah.
Let's be very clear.
So we want churches to do better. We want them to care, of
Right.
course. We know that they can,
Yeah.
right? But we also are not pretending that there aren't real problems here that the church needs to be thinking about more and do better and doing better with.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know this seems like a downer.
Yeah.
Besides all
It,
that,
it's very real.
it
That's
is.
fine.
It is. It's like the joke of, well, besides all that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? You know. Anyway, I mean, it is. These are heavy topics. This is a really heavy, real podcast that we're trying to do here, and
Yeah.
we're going to fumble our way through it. But as you said, I want everyone to hear our heart. I I think sometimes I know for me, I have been known to be very negative and very, you know, um, glass is half empty, pessimistic. The church is the bride of Christ, and she will prevail. And in that process, I want us to bring everyone. Everyone is welcome around the table of the wedding supper of the Lamb, so that we can do that. So I think that's our heart, right? That's what we
Yes.
want people to hear. So,
Yes.
um, thank you guys for hanging in there with us. Um,
Abs-
I won't say we're going to get better, but we're going to keep showing up and keep having the conversation, and we're going to keep recording, right?
yeah.
So follow us. Tell people if this was helpful, and we hope it was. If we, um, like and subscribe and all that stuff, we're going to try to figure some of that out too along the way. And hopefully some people can, gain some help from our podcast. So thanks for showing up. Appreciate you,
Yes.
Robert.
You as well, David.
Talk
Until next
soon.
time.
Yep.
All right.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.